Good evening, everybody. It is 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Cooking with Plants. I'm Kelly Wilson, and I'm going to be teaching this class tonight. Tonight, we're going to be focused on whole food soy proteins. If you missed our class from last month, we covered kind of some basic FAQs on plant proteins, and we talked specifically about beans and lentils, so the legume proteins. This month, like I said, we're zooming in on those whole food soy proteins. So for those of you who I haven't met, like I said, my name's Kelly Wilson. I'm a registered dietitian at Trinity Health in Ann Arbor in Southeast Michigan. And I'm also board certified in lifestyle medicine. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's totally fine. It's a new and growing medical subspecialty that focuses on treating, reversing, and preventing chronic illness through 6 key pillars. And one of those pillars is a whole food, plant-forward dietary pattern. And that's what we focus on in these Cooking with Plants classes. The other 5 pillars are restorative sleep, positive social connection, regular physical activity, avoiding risky substances. So those pillars combined with the whole food, plant-forward dietary pattern help prevent, treat, and reverse chronic illness and promote whole person well-being. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to teach these classes and spend time in the kitchen with you because I firmly believe that anybody can be a cook and you don't have to have really expensive ingredients or really fancy kitchen tools to make delicious, healthy, nutritious meals that you and your family want to eat. And that's really the whole point of this class series, is to break down the basics of cooking with whole, real, plant-based foods. So hopefully it makes it easier to add into your regular meal rotations. We cover a lot of different recipes in this class, and recipes are always suggestions. So if there's an ingredient that you can't find or that you don't quite have a taste for yet, you can go ahead and swap that out for something else. And I'll try throughout classes to give some tips on what those swaps might be. And if you're new to eating this plant-based way, or you're new to just adding more of these plant foods that we're talking about to your plate, be patient with yourself. Set small bite-sized goals for how you're going to incorporate some of these new foods, and then be persistent. Don't worry about being perfect. It's that persistent, continued focus on trying and adding some of these foods that's going to help you achieve those goals and improve your health and well-being. Be kind to yourself in that process, and then celebrate anytime you do try a new food or you have some other type of win. It's really important that we celebrate our successes along the way. Before we get into our content, if you would like to have closed captionings, if that makes it easier for you to engage with this class, you can go up to the 3 dots at the top right of your screen where it says More, select Language and Speech, and then turn on Live Captions, and you should see the captions populate on your screen. If you would like to ask a question in this class, unfortunately, everybody is muted and your videos are turned off, and that's because we are recording this class and we want to make sure that we have a clean recording and no sensitive information is shared. So we're asking, if you do have a question, I do want you to ask questions, please put it in the Q&A box, which is those 2 little word bubbles with the question mark. And I would ask that when you do put a question in there, make sure that it's relevant to the specific content that we're covering, and it's relevant to the whole group that is here with us tonight in class. If you have a really specific question or you want more information about something maybe that we aren't diving into tonight, please email lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. That's lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. And I will make sure to respond to your specific question. If you're a Trinity Health colleague, You get Live Your Whole Life points towards keeping your insurance premiums low for participating in this class, and you get those points for every class you participate in, whether you watch live or the recording. Just email that lifestyle medicine at Trinity-Health email address and you'll get your points. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone that this is a general information class. So while I may talk about whole foods that are plant-based and that those foods are good for most health conditions, if you're newly diagnosed with a chronic health condition, I highly recommend you speak to your physician and a registered dietitian before making drastic changes to your diet. And I will also talk through some ingredients, like I use oils and salt in these classes. If you have heart disease or high blood pressure, those might be things you want to avoid. And so I'll try to talk about that through the class. But if you have any specific questions about how to make nutrition tweaks for your health conditions and concerns, always great idea to speak with a registered dietitian. And I'm happy to connect you to one if you email us at that lifestyle medicine email address. This is our class series. We are in the 4th class of this year. So like I said, we're on plant protein, soy. If you've missed our other classes, we've covered stocking your pantry, using whole grains, and using beans and lentils. You can watch the recordings of those on our YouTube channel and our Vimeo. They're also on the class website, which you will receive a link to in the follow-up email after class. If you were forwarded to this meeting and you haven't joined our series or signed up for our classes, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you to a registration page, and that's how you get signed up for all of the future classes. I also added a new class. We're going to plantify our family favorite recipes. You should have received an email with a link to share your favorite recipe that you would love to see made over in our June class. And they'll have a QR code at the end of today's class where you can scan and get right to that form if you haven't had a chance to submit your idea. Right, so tonight we're going to review some of the basics of protein and where we can find protein in plants. Again, encourage you to watch that beans and lentils class from last month if you missed that, because I dive into a lot of frequently asked questions and some common myths around plant proteins. And then we're going to talk through what the heck whole food soy is, what kind of foods that is, and then we're going to cook through 4, maybe 5 different recipes that contain those soy foods. Already talked about this. So let's review some of the benefits of protein. Right, so we can get protein from a variety of different sources, both animal and plant-based. But when we're including plant-based proteins, we're getting a whole host of other benefits beyond the benefits conferred by just protein itself. So in general, protein-containing foods, whether they're animal or plant-based, support immune health. They help us build muscle. So it's helpful for repair and recovery post-exercise. They help us maintain stable blood sugar. They keep us full longer. And protein foods are really important for the production of enzymes and hormones that keep our metabolism and all of our body's internal processes humming along smoothly. The bonus, the added benefits when we eat protein from plant foods is that we're getting all of those benefits, plus we're getting fiber, which is really important for our digestive health. It also helps with satiety. It helps with the production of short-chain fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory, promote cognitive health, whole host of benefits from consuming fiber. And plant foods also contain phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. So these are compounds that have health-inducing properties that are only found in plant foods. They reduce inflammation. They help prevent some chronic illnesses. And then finally, these plant proteins help reduce our impact on the planet. They promote planetary health. animal proteins, animal agriculture is responsible for 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. Beef and lamb are some of the worst offenders. They also utilize a lot of water. So we can reduce our carbon footprint and our impact on the planet when we elect to have more of these plant protein options on our plate more often. So where do you find protein in plants? Pretty much everywhere. Beans and lentils, which we talked about last month. A half cup gives you about 8 grams of plant protein. You can get protein from nuts and seeds, particularly seeds like hemp and pumpkin are particularly high in protein. And then whole grains. So people think about quinoa as a high protein grain, and it is, but oats and wild rice or manoomin are also high protein and come in at between 7 to 10 grams of protein per cup of grain. And something that might shock you is that vegetables also have protein. Green peas, which are a legume like beans and lentils, maybe not surprising, have about 9 grams of protein per cup. And then broccoli, spinach, and sweet potatoes, which might be a little more surprising, have around 3 grams of protein per cup. So if we're eating a wide variety of these plant foods, we're including beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, whole grains, vegetables, and some of the soy foods we're talking about in our daily and our weekly dietary pattern, we're going to meet our protein needs and we're going to get everything our body needs to be well. And we're getting those bonus compounds that are helping prevent chronic illness. So let's talk about soy. A lot of times when I'm talking to patients or I'm doing these cooking classes, get a lot of concerned questions about soy foods and are they safe to eat? There's a lot of myths out there, and the short answer is that you don't need to be worried about consuming soy. The most up-to-date research shows that the isoflavones, which are plant compounds in soy, they're kind of the phytoestrogens or the plant estrogens in the soy foods, are actually protective of cardiovascular disease and can help prevent reoccurrence or instance of breast and prostate cancer. And some of those isoflavones also act as potent antioxidants, which are protecting our cells from damage. So that's all good. And soy foods are also high in B6, which is a really important vitamin for the production of serotonin and melatonin. Serotonin is that feel-good brain chemical. Melatonin is that hormone that helps with balancing our circadian rhythm and helping us have a restful night's sleep. Sometimes folks worry about soy foods and thyroid, and if it's safe to consume soy foods with thyroid issues. And the short answer is yes. You just like any other food, you just don't want to consume soy foods with your thyroid medication, but eating several servings of soy throughout the week is not a problem, especially if you have adequate iodine stores, which you can get iodine from eating sea vegetables and iodized salt, or if you include fish in your diet, you're also getting some iodine from the fish as well. The first soy food that I want to introduce you to is soy milk. This is something I think we've seen on the grocery store shelves for a while now in this country. And we can purchase it in either the refrigerated section or in shelf-stable forms. Soy milk is mature soybeans, so you can see the dried mature soybeans on the screen here in that picture. That's what's on the table. It's those soybeans that have been soaked in water and then pressed. It's often fortified with calcium because a lot of folks are consuming it as a cow's milk replacement. And it has a decent amount of protein per cup. Out of all of the dairy alternative options, so like our oat milk or rice milk, soy milk has the closest nutrition profile to cow's milk. dairy. It's closest in terms of protein, and when it's fortified with calcium, it's close on calcium. Whenever you're purchasing soy milk or any other dairy alternative, just look for an unsweetened option. Tofu, this is something we're going to cook through tonight, and hopefully these recipes will turn you into a tofu lover. That's my goal with tonight's class. Tofu is essentially soy milk cheese. So it's that soy milk that we were just talking about with a curdling agent added to it. Often it's magnesium or calcium chloride. If those are utilized, you heard calcium in the name there, then the tofu does also contribute to your calcium intake. So soy milk plus that curdling agent, it's let to set, and then it's pressed to separate the curds from the liquid whey. And what we get left over when it's pressed are the tofu blocks. There are several different types of tofu. There's silken, which it has been pressed for the shortest amount of time, so it's smooth and it's got a lot more liquid. It's waterier. There's firm and extra firm. Extra firm has been pressed for the longest amount of time, has the least amount of water. It's ideal for stir frying and sauteing. We're going to do that tonight. Tofu also provides a wonderful amount of protein, 9 grams per about 3 ounces, which is a fifth of a typical package. Tempeh is another soy food that I hope by the end of tonight's class you are excited to try if you haven't tried it. Its texture is firmer than tofu. Some folks who are hesitant with tofu, it's the soft texture that they're not a fan of. Tempeh, it has more of a chewy, meatier texture. So if you're hesitant, maybe that's the soy food that you start with, would be the tempeh. Like tofu, it doesn't have a lot of flavor, and it really soaks up and takes up the flavor of whatever you cook it with. Tempeh is fermented soybeans, so it's typically those mature soybeans and a grain inoculated with a fungus and then let to ferment. And it's pressed into these nice little blocks, which I'll show you later. It's a traditional food in Indonesia. And it is, again, a protein powerhouse. About half of a package is going to give you around 20 grams of protein. So that's a decent amount of protein. That's around what, or even a little bit more than what most people need per meal. And then finally, we have edamame. So edamame is fresh soybeans. So think of these like the green peas that you would get in your garden, like our sugar snap peas, kind of similar. And we're eating just the bean, the pea that's in the center of that pod, because the hull, which you can see here in the picture, is really tough and fibrous. It's not going to hurt you if you eat it. It's just, it might give you a little digestive distress because it's really, really fibrous and kind of tough to chew. In the United States, we're typically finding edamame shelled or in the hull in the frozen section of the grocery store. And we're getting 7 grams of protein per cup from edamame. All right. Now you're oriented to soy foods. We're going to go ahead and get cooking. All right. Our first recipe, we're going to do a tofu scramble. And I should have said all of the recipes will be on the class website. I'll get them uploaded in the next few days, and that link to the website and recipes will be shared with the recording once that is available. So our first recipe, tofu scramble. This is a really fast, easy way to get a nutrient-dense, protein-dense breakfast, or I often eat this for lunch. And it's a good introduction if tofu is new for you because it doesn't require a lot of extra steps to prepare the tofu. So we start with a block of firm tofu. This is extra firm tofu. Tofu comes typically in these plastic containers. There's a lot of liquid that the tofu is sitting in, and we want to drain that out. So I'm going to place this down and show you. The way I like to drain my tofu, I like to take a paring knife and cut into the plastic, taking care not to slice into the tofu block. And I usually do that around 3 sides of the package. And then I've got my bowl. Pretend this is your sink. And I would do this if you're going to do it into the sink right next to your sink, because I've made the mistake of trying to carry this around my kitchen and then I spill tofu liquid everywhere, which is fine, but just another thing you have to clean up. So then you just dump it in here. Okay. And now I'm going to dump this into this bowl, and we're going to come back to that in a second. So that is the first step of the recipe, just like getting your tofu out of the package. We are going to saute some onion and some pepper in this recipe. So we're going to start with the onion. I know we've cut one together before, but for any of our friends joining who haven't, we're going to go through that. This is a chef's knife. I can tell because it's got this nice rounded curve here. I hold a chef knife by pinching the heel between my thumb and my first finger here. Okay, so kind of like that. And then I wrap my 3 fingers around the blade, or the handle, excuse me. And I hold it like that because it gives me a really sturdy grip, protects my wrist, protects my elbow, and gives me better leverage when I'm cutting. And I use my chef's knife in this kind of rocking motion. You can think of your hand kind of on a crank that you're pulling back towards your body. And that's how you get that nice rocking motion. All right, so for my onion, I'm going to lay it down on its side with the stem end facing to the right and the hairy root end facing to my left. I'm going to slice off the top, throw that into my compost bin, set my cut side down on the cutting board. Whenever you're working with vegetables, it's helpful to try to get to a flat surface so that they don't roll around on your cutting board. It's a lot safer. I'm going to slice from the root end back towards where that stem end was in the middle of my onion. And we're only going to use half the onion today, so I'm going to set one half aside, and I'm going to peel off this papery layer into our compost bowl here. And sometimes I like to go another layer down, just depends on how hard the paper is to get off. All right, so I've got that off. Now, our onion has these nice little guidelines on it, these grooves. We're going to use those as cutting guidelines. We're going to leave about a finger's width from the stem end that we don't slice through. And we're going to take our chef's knife and take the tip of it, and we're going to angle our knife around the onion on those guidelines. And we're going to slice all the way down to the cutting board as we angle our knife around on those guidelines. It does not have to be perfect. You're just trying to get roughly evenly spaced slices along that onion. Now I'm going to take the tip of my chef knife on the cutting board, and I'm going to cut the opposite direction, so kind of parallel to that root end, the nice evenly spaced slices until I get to that section where I didn't cut with my first slices. And now I'm just going to make some thin slices, gather those together. And there we go. We have some nice, that's more of a fine dice for our onions, and that's perfect. These will cook pretty quickly, and we won't get giant slices of onion in our mouths while we're trying to eat our tofu scramble. All right, so I'm going to go over here to my large skillet. I'm going to turn it on to medium high. Well, I turned it on to high because I want to get this warmed up. And I'm going to add, I've got a tablespoon of olive oil. If you're looking to reduce oil consumption for heart health reasons or other reasons, you could do a water saute here. So you could swap out that oil for water. And I'm going to get my onions in here. Typically, I like to let my skillet warm up for about 30 seconds to a minute until It sizzles when I add those onions in, but for the sake of time, we're just going to add those in while we cut our pepper. So our bell pepper, the recipe calls for a small bell pepper, so I'm probably going to use about 2/3 of this one. It's kind of big. I like to cut them. There's lots of different ways to cut them. My preferred method is just to lay it down on its side with, again, stem end facing one way, blossom end facing another way. And then I like to slice the top off, turn it around. I like to slice this bumpy end off. And these are perfectly good. We can totally use these. We're going to set those aside. And now you can see the inside of our pepper. We've got the pith, this white part that is connected to the core where all of our seeds are. We want to remove the pith and the core without getting seeds everywhere. So one way that I like to do that is to make kind of squared off cuts. I'm slicing in between where that pith and the skin of the red pepper connect. Slice down, turn it around, slice down, making these kind of squared off cuts. And what's nice about making the cuts squared off like that is that now I can stack these on top of each other and I can make thin little matchsticks that then I can gather into a pile and cut the opposite direction to get my nice dice. Okay, so I'm going to get these ones into our skillet. I hear something starting to sizzle, so it looks like we're getting close to that being warmed up. And we'll repeat with these ones. So again, tip of the knife on the cutting board. You're just trying to make evenly spaced slices. If it starts to fall off, that's fine. Just set it aside. We'd rather want to be safe rather than try to maintain the stack. And then we're going to gather these all together again and make nice cuts. I didn't talk about the claw, so you can see that I'm trying to keep my non-knife holding hand, the fingers away from the knife blade by making a claw, so curling my fingertips under. It's a very helpful way to protect yourself while cooking. All right, so we've got our peppers in there, and we're gonna let those saute for a couple minutes until the pepper and onion become soft and the onion starts to become a little translucent. Okay, so while that is happening, we are also going to work on some mushrooms. So we've got 1.5 cups of button mushrooms here. And I want to show you how we got to these nice, beautiful slices, because we're going to add these to our skillet in a moment as well. So these are the button mushrooms. You can use any type of mushroom. These are just what the grocery store had near us. To cut them, I usually like to pop the stems out. So you can do that. We were talking earlier, that's kind of a satisfying feeling to pop those out. So pop the stems out. We'll use them. And then again, this kind of rolls all over the place, right? So I want to put the mushroom down on that flat surface where it's not going to roll around. And then I'm making nice thin slices, rock and motion. All right. So we're going to put those into our cup here. And then for the stems, I just like to, again, make nice thin slices, cut it in half. That works too. And we'll still use those. Some people discard them or throw them in their compost. I think they're perfectly fine unless they get really big and then they get a little woody, but these ones are totally tender. All right, we're gonna give our skillet a stir here. That's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna add my mushrooms and I'm gonna turn down my heat because my onions are starting to brown. And I don't want them to get burnt or brown too much. Okay, so now got a little bit more than 1.5 cups, so we'll just do our 1.5 cups of mushrooms are going in there. So mushrooms have a soluble fiber called beta glucan. which is really good for helping lowering cholesterol. Our onions have some nice organosulfur compounds that help our body's detoxification processes and have been linked to lower incidences of cancer. And then our red peppers have a lot of vitamin C in them, which is important for collagen formation and for immune function. So, I mean, not only is this saute delicious and beautiful, it's also packed with some good for us nutrients. All right, next we're going to add in, we've got, this is a 12-ounce package. Yeah, 12-ounce package of chopped spinach. I'm going to add about half of it in here. I think the recipe says about 2 cups. You could use fresh spinach as well that you chopped up. Again, you just want to do about 2 cups. A little bit of a stir. Our spinach is adding some folate. Spinach is a good source of plant-based iron, especially when we combine it with foods that have vitamin C, like citrus or these peppers. Helps us absorb that plant-based iron. Okay. Come back with me to my cutting board. You can see the tofu has released a little bit of water. I'm going to just drain that off. And now what I'm going to do, this is a scramble. So this recipe is basically making an alternative to scrambled eggs. So I'm going to take this fork and break up my tofu block until it resembles the consistency and texture of scrambled eggs. So it doesn't need to be completely smooth. You can leave some large chunks in there, just whatever scrambled eggs look like to you. That's what we're going for. All right, so now we're going to add this into our skillet over here. Oh, and it looks like I missed breaking up a couple of spots, so that's fine. I'm just going to use my spatula to do that work for me. And then we've got some spices and seasonings that we want to add into here. And these are going to help mimic some of the flavors we're used to in a typical scramble and some of the color. So we've got some turmeric, really good anti-inflammatory spice. Honestly, our spices and herbs are some of the most dense concentrations of anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer compounds. So making sure you're stocking your pantry with spices is always a good thing, and that makes your food taste good. We've got a half teaspoon of garlic powder. We've got a tablespoon of nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast adds kind of that umami, that savory flavor. It also has kind of a cheese-like flavor as well. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I've got some smoked paprika going in here as well. And I'm just going to give all of that a stir. And now what we do is we just let this cook for about 5-10 minutes until everything is warmed all the way through and those spices have had a chance to infuse into the tofu. Because tofu doesn't really have much of a flavor. The beauty of it is it's a blank canvas and it just takes on and absorbs the flavor of whatever spices and seasonings you're combining it with. So we're going to let this do its work and let those spices and flavors absorb into it. So we're going to come back to that in a second. You could totally eat it right now. Tofu is safe to eat just right out of the package. It just might not be as flavorful as if you let it cook for a little while. Okay, so I'm going to stop stirring. We're going to do one other thing. Pass that off to you guys over there. So tofu, I showed you that block of tofu. There's lots of different ways to prepare it for various recipes. I mentioned that this scramble, we didn't really have to do a lot of fussing. We just drained it out of the package and put it right into the skillet after breaking it up. Often recipes when we're using tofu in our savory kind of lunch or dinner dishes, it's going to call for pressing water out of that tofu, even if you purchase the extra firm option. So you can get water out of tofu a couple different ways. You can take that block and you can drain the water out of the package. You can set the tofu block on a plate, put another plate on top of it, put a heavy book on it, let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes, and then drain off any water that comes out. That's one way. You can boil some water, put your drained tofu block into a bowl, add some salt to that water that you boiled, and then pour that over the tofu block. That salt water and the heat from the water and the salt kind of pull water out of the tofu block. It's kind of counterintuitive to be soaking a tofu block in water to draw water out, but the salt and the heat do some really cool food chemistry magic and pull the water out. My favorite, though, is to drain your block of tofu, pat it dry, stick it in a Ziploc bag, and then put it in the freezer. When the tofu freezes, when the water in that tofu freezes, it forms ice crystals that create all these air pockets. And when you defrost the tofu, all the water gets released from that tofu block, and you're left with all these nice little air pockets that absorb all of the flavor of whatever you're cooking it with and provide this really nice, chewy texture. So if you've always been skeptical of tofu for the texture, try freezing it before using it in one of your recipes, and that might be the game-changing difference for you. Okay, we're going to work with some tofu that I froze. I'm going to show you. This is right here. This is half a block of tofu that I froze already. And then I put between a couple pieces of towel and pressed it to absorb extra water. And you can see those air pockets that formed from when the ice crystals formed and then the water drained out. So I'm going to show you a basic saute, so a stir fry. So I'm going to cut these into kind of cubes. You can also cook tofu in an air fryer if that's a tool that you have. That is another great way to get crispy texture without too much fuss. It depends on the model that you have, but typically about 20 minutes in an air fryer. You would toss your tofu in oil and the spices that you want, and then roast it in the air fryer for 20 minutes. So back to our stove top. Turn off our scramble and come back to that. We're looking at our small skillet over here. I'm going to turn my heat on for that small skillet. Got to get the right burner first. I am going to, oh, can I have that oil back, please? Thank you. All right, I'm going to add, this is about a tablespoon of olive oil. And this tofu I didn't season. I'm just showing you kind of how to work with it. But now would be a good time to, soak it in a marinade with maybe some coconut aminos and some red pepper flakes and ginger, or maybe you want to go more Mediterranean flavors and you soak it in some olive oil and za'atar spices and a little bit of salt. So I'm probably actually not going to do all of this because I'm working with a small skillet. I'm just going to put the tofu cubes into my skillet here, and then we are going to let that do its thing and come back to it while we're working on some other recipes. So I do want to show you another way. So the other half of that tofu block, I cut into the same shapes, and then I tossed in some avocado oil and a little bit of salt. And then I spread it out evenly on a sheet tray and baked it for 20 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is nice and crispy and chewy. So if you really like that crispy, chewy texture, that's a really great way to prepare it as well. And this is what it looks like. So you can see the difference between raw and roasted. All right, that's our tofu. So we're going to just keep watching that. Our scramble is done. So now this is ready to be plated up. Put this into our nice bowl here. And voila, you have a nice, lovely breakfast or lunch option. I would serve this maybe with some sliced avocado on top and some whole grain toast. Also really delicious with some microgreens sprinkled on top or sprouts. Turn down our tofu and we're going to switch gears and work on another recipe. Okay, before we move away from tofu, want to do some work with silken tofu. So we talked about, we've been using firm tofu for the recipes that we are talking about. I'm gonna just flip my tofu pieces here. So I'm using tongs. This is really helpful when you're working with tofu in cubes like this to be able to easily flip it without breaking it apart. Another benefit of doing the frozen method, it's spongier and so it doesn't crumble as much when you're trying to flip it. So I'm just looking for it to get this like light brown, and you would just cook it for as long as you want to get to the crispiness you want on either side. So we're going to let that go just a little bit longer, but it's getting pretty close. Okay, I'm going to turn down the heat just a little bit so we can talk about silken tofu. Okay, so this is the silken tofu. We've got it in our bowl. You can see a little bit of the water here. We did drain out some of the silken tofu water, but we didn't press it. So you're not doing that like you would with the other tofu. This is a really fast, really easy snack option. So for our silken tofu, 5-minute silken tofu, I've got a tablespoon of coconut aminos. I have got a half teaspoon of, a quarter teaspoon of garlic powder. I have got a half teaspoon of sesame seeds, some sesame oil, this is about half teaspoon of sesame oil, and a quarter teaspoon of red pepper flakes. We already added the garlic. And I'm just gonna stir that and make a little dressing that I am then going to drizzle on top of my tofu. So add some savory umami, a little bit of salt. And then this is a green onion. We're gonna trim off the root hair ends and any kind of scraggly ends on the green side. And I'm gonna use the greens and the white. And we are going to slice thin slices. Actually, I'm gonna just use the greens. And then we're gonna sprinkle that on top. And there you go. You have a really delicious Asian-inspired snack, or you can pair this with some cooked brown rice and some steamed broccoli for a 5-minute dinner. Just throw some frozen broccoli in the microwave, one of those rice packets, those Uncle Ben's or Seeds of Change rice packets that are already cooked. Make this dressing and you have dinner in 5 minutes. All right. Here. All right, so let's check on our tofu. Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay, so getting nice and brown. I don't want it to get much browner than that. So we're gonna call it. I'm gonna pull it off of the heat here so we can make space for our next recipes. But you can see, can you hear me back that tofu? cooked tofu. Yeah, thank you. So here's just the difference between roasted in the oven and sauteed on the stove. So this is a little bit drier and crispier. This is going to have a little bit more moisture and be a little bit more on the chewier side. Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we are going to be working with some edamame, which is that immature soybean. We're going to be doing a saute, and that saute, that's really, it's a stir fry. So that stir fry is going to have some cabbage in it. This is a purple cabbage. I've peeled the outer leaves off of it, and I'm going to slice the stem end off again so we can get to our nice flat stable surface for cutting. You could use a green cabbage here as well. I just think that the colors of the purple cabbage go really well in this dish, and you're also getting some added anthocyanins, great for cognitive function and cardiovascular health as well with these. So I'm going to slice, I put my sliced root end down on the cutting board. I'm going to slice from North Pole to South Pole on that cabbage, and I get these nice beautiful halves. You can set the one aside and use it for making a slaw or another saute. And now I want to core my cabbage. So this is really hard, and it's fibrous and not as enjoyable to munch on when we're eating dishes like this. So I'm going to cut it out by taking the tip of my chef's knife, and I'm going to make about a 30-degree angle cut on either side. So I'm pressing my the tip of my chef's knife in about probably 3/4 of an inch, and I'm slicing down towards my cutting board, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then that core pops right out. Now I missed a little bit of it, and that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and go back in and slice a little bit more on this side and pop it right out, and we are good to go. Now, if you have any kind of wimpy pieces on the side of your cabbage still, you can get rid of those. I'm going to cut this in half again to get some pieces that are a little bit more manageable to work with. So actually, I'm going to cut it into quarters, I think. And now I'm going to make some thin slices. I'm cutting it small because it's going to make this cook a little bit faster. And part of my goal with all of these recipes is to give you fast and fairly easy meals. So slicing it that way will make this cook a little bit faster. And that's also why we're using some frozen veggies in tonight's class. So frozen vegetables, just as good as fresh. I mean, they're picked at peak ripeness and then frozen. You don't want to keep them in your freezer for years because they will start to lose some of their nutritional value over time. But if you're using them within, a few months of purchasing, they're just as good as fresh. Okay, honestly, I think that's as much cabbage. This is a pretty dense cabbage. So we're going to go with this. I'm going to get my skillet going over here. So we're going to do a water saute this time so you can see how that works. I've got a couple tablespoons of water. Water sauteing is basically steaming. I get this in here, a couple tablespoons of water. Got my purple cabbage. And then another ingredient we're using in here is ginger. So we want to mince our ginger and get rid of this peel, which is a little bit bitter and kind of that the paperiness gets like stuck on the side of our mouths. So to make a more enjoyable eating experience, I'm going to just trim off these bumpy ends with my paring knife. I'm going to take a kitchen spoon and just pull it towards me, gently scraping across the surface of the ginger. And that helps get rid of the peel. Again, you don't have to be perfect. We're just going to get as much of it off as we can, right? And then we're going to mince. I'm going to get rid of the cabbage on my knife first. There we go. So we like to mince ginger and things like garlic because they're really flavorful, and can, to some people, have a spiciness to them. So we want to infuse that flavor throughout the dish rather than getting large chunks of it. If you enjoy that spicy flavor, cut it a little bit bigger, and then you'll get those nice, flavorful bursts. To mince, my chef's knife's on the cutting board. I'm using my thumb and my first finger grip with my 3 fingers around the handle, and I'm just making thin slices. There's a little bit more ginger than what the recipe calls for, so we're going to do about 3/4 of what I just had there. And then I'm getting my little discs into a pile, and I'm just kind of gathering these pieces into piles and going back and forth, until it's the size that I want it. Ginger has really potent anti-nausea properties. It's safe to use for nausea from chemotherapy or during pregnancy. So a nice ginger tea. It's also got a lot of anti-inflammatory compounds in it. It can help when you're feeling kind of sick. It's also fresh ginger. I like using over powdered whenever I have the time or whenever it's available because it has a little bit more sweetness to it. I find dried powdered ginger a little bit bitter sometimes. So I'm adding my ginger to my skillet. I've got 2 cloves of garlic that I'm adding. I've got a teaspoon of red pepper flakes that I'm also adding. You can add less if you don't love spicy. I'm going big tonight, so we're going to do it all. And then I've got a tablespoon of maple syrup that's going in here. I have got a package of edamame, mukmami. Going in here as well. So this one looks like it was in the freezer a little while. So it's got some freezer burn on it. That's okay. It's just going to help with our steaming and sauteing. And then I have got so that was a 10-ounce package of edamame. I've got a 10-ounce package of mixed cruciferous vegetables. So those vegetables are broccoli and our cauliflower. This one also has some carrots mixed into it. Cabbage is also a cruciferous vegetable. Looks like the grocery store had these for a little while. So that's okay. We're just going to have lots of steaming action. I'm just going to break up those chunks. And I'm going to put a lid on this. And we're just going to let it steam and all those flavors work together for a little while we work on our last and final recipe, tempeh fajitas. So our tempeh fajitas. This is tempeh. So it typically comes in this package. This is not the only brand of tempeh out there. This is just the one that we happen to have at our grocery store. It's pressed into this nice little block. Again, it's got kind of a chewier or a nuttier flavor and texture to it. I opened a package of tempeh. I already did some prep for this recipe, but I opened the package of tempeh and thinly sliced it so that we have strips that someone was telling me earlier kind of look like chicken strips. Okay, so these are our strips. And then this has been marinated. Turn my skillet on while we're talking. Okay, this has been marinated for about an hour in a mixture of 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of lime juice, which is about 1 lime, and then a tablespoon and a half of taco seasoning. And you're going to get a recipe on how to make your own taco seasoning, which is really just paprika and cumin, a tiny bit of salt, some garlic powder, some oregano, and paprika, if I didn't say that already. And so it's a combination of those spices. And what's nice with the taco seasoning recipe that you'll get, you can play up or play down some of those spices depending on your own preferences. The tempeh was also steamed. So I steamed it I sliced it before I marinated it. I sliced it and then I put it into this saucepan. That's what we have right here with this steamer basket. Okay. And about half an inch of water in the steamer basket. Put the tempeh in here, put the lid on, and steamed it for 10 minutes. Steaming helps reduce some of the bitterness in the tempeh and helps it soak up our flavors here. So now we're going to take this tempeh that's all prepared. We're going to put it in our skillet with all of the marinade. And we're just going to let that warm. Tempeh, just like tofu, perfectly safe to eat right out of the package. It just tastes a little bit better to some people when it's warmed up and the flavors of their spices have melded with it, and the heat can help the flavors kind of come into the tempeh. You can use tempeh, you can crumble it, so you can take that block and you can break it apart in your hands, and you can saute it in your skillet with the same spices and seasonings you would use if you were making a ground meat for a sloppy joe or for a chili recipe or for tacos. You can use the tempeh in those same applications, and it's really, really delicious. And I think a lot of people who have some hesitation with soy proteins like tofu tend to really enjoy the tempeh. So we're going to I'm going to check our edamame recipe while our tempeh is getting up to temp. And let's see here. All right, that's looking pretty good. So one thing that I love about this recipe is how colorful it is. This is pretty watery right now, so I'm going to leave that lid off, which is helpful because then we can use it for our tempeh here. So we talk about in this class, and if you've been in any of our other lifestyle medicine classes, eating the rainbow. So trying to eat as many different colors every day and throughout the week and challenging ourselves to do that. And then this dish, we're getting like 4 or 5 different colors just in this one dish, which I think is kind of fun. So especially if you're using the frozen veggie mixes that have the carrots in it. And you're getting cruciferous vegetables, which cruciferous vegetables have a compound called sulforaphane in them, which is a really powerful compound that helps with our detoxification processes and our body's internal ability to produce antioxidants. So again, protecting our cells from damage, and which causes disease. So you're getting a lot of that sulforaphane power right here from our cabbage, our broccoli, our cauliflower. So I'm going to turn this off. That's looking pretty good. And we are going to add our final touch of a couple tablespoons of coconut aminos. Coconut aminos are a soy sauce alternative that are lower in sodium, and they have a touch of sweetness. They're made from coconut nectar. So they've got a little bit of sweetness to them, which is nice because then you don't have to add as much sweetness with the rest of your dish. Alrighty, so we got that good to go. The recipe calls for cooking 1 cup of quinoa, so which makes about 4.5 cups of cooked quinoa. So I've got a portion of my cooked quinoa here, and I am just gonna scoop my edamame, getting a little bit of olive veggies. So remember, if you have your 1 cup of quinoa, that's about 9 grams of protein. You're getting if you have your 1/2 cup of edamame that you're scooping in here. You're getting another 7 grams of protein. So you've got about 15 grams of protein without really working too hard for it. So there you go. There's your edamame, easy edamame stir fry. I know we're at time and I apologize for going a little bit over. But we have one more thing to finish up. We're going to add in this is a bag of just fajita blend. So sliced peppers and onions. I'm just going to gently stir that. I'm going to put the lid back on. And we're just going to cook that until the fajita veggies are cooked all the way through and no longer frozen and warm. So we'll come back to that in a second. But because I'm sure some people need to go, I just want to share my screen real quick with the QR code for that form to share your family favorite recipe that you want made over. And then we'll finish up with our fajitas. So here is that QR code. Hopefully you're seeing that. There you go. So you'd be seeing that on the screen. So if you hold up your cell phone in the photo app to the camera app to that QR code, it should take you to a Microsoft form where you can fill in your family favorite recipe idea for it to be entered to be featured in our June Plantifying Your Family Recipes class. So I'll give you a minute to scan that. All right. And this will also be included in the class follow-up email as well. So don't worry if you didn't have a chance to scan it or QR codes don't work for you and your phone. It'll be in the class follow-up email. All right, let's go over here to our fajitas. There we go. Looking good. All right. So now I am ready to put my fajitas. They're my tempeh, my beautiful colorful vegetables into a whole grain corn tortilla. Okay, so I've got my whole grain corn tortillas. I typically warm these up in a skillet for about 10 seconds per side. I'm going to take a few pieces of my tempeh. And I'm going to put some of my veggies in here. And there we go. I've got my nice tempeh fajita. I could serve this with some avocados or some guacamole. You could make a rice bowl with this instead of using the tortilla shells and top it with some cilantro. If that's a flavor that you enjoy, squeeze a little bit more lime juice on top of that. That's also really delicious. So we've gone a few minutes over. I appreciate those of you who have stuck with us for these few minutes and your patience with me going a little bit long tonight. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but if you have any questions that have come up throughout class that I didn't address, or if you have any questions from our previous classes, feel free to reach out at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. And otherwise, look for the follow-up email with the recipe links and the website link. And I will see you next month when we talk all about adding flavor to our dishes. So take good care, have a good night, and happy cooking. Bye.